If you're anything like me, then you've been listening to Taylor Swift for the past 5 months on repeat. To make life easier, I decided to build a list of all the surprise songs that have been announced and those that have not been announced. Follow along to see how I did it. We're going to start off with an H1 tag that's going to be our main banner header. And then we're going to create the table in a separate component, and we're going to call it song list. And then we're going to add a couple tags here, starting with section, a div. We're going to add a table. We're going to add some table elements, starting with the header. We're going to add date, location, song, album, and repeat, since Taylor has now repeated a few songs. You're going to do what I didn't do here and include the body inside the table. I left that out, and you're going to see me kind of look around throughout this video. And that's why, because I couldn't find that till the very end. Next, you're going to want to create some dummy data to make sure this is all formatted right, or as right as it can be. I just picked the date that I attended Taylor's concert. And she played Death by a Thousand Cuts from the album Lover. And this was a no to the repeat. Next, we're going to import the table inside of our app. You should see the data appear right away. And then we're going to add a button here. We're going to quickly jump to a separate component file to make a button instead of using the dummy data. We're just going to call that song button. And inside that, we're going to have a div that contains two buttons, one played and one for unplayed. And then we're going to import that component inside of our app and add that right above the table. Next, with the power of editing, we're going to magically have all of our data here. And then we'll import both lists, which is going to be called the track list and the songs left. Next, we're going to map over our track list. And we're going to pass in an index as well, because we will need that as our key. And then we'll move in our dummy data inside of the map. And then we're just going to update all of the static text here with track dot whatever name we need. So date, location. And we can see they're all being listed here. And next we're going to do some styling. So back over on our app.jsx, we're going to make a flex column, we're going to center, and we're going to give it a little padding on top. And then we're going to increase the size of our H1. And then our div holding our buttons is going to be styled as well. The gap isn't going to do anything until we give a little more context to those buttons. Next, inside of our table, we're going to start adding some classes, starting with a full, overflow x auto, and flex and justify center. Inside the div, we're going to give a couple different sizes based on screen size here. That way, later in the video, you'll see when I adjust the size of our window, it will be responsive. Next, inside the table, we're going to add some colors and some other elements like our rounded edges, our shadow, and we're going to push all the text to the left. And then on each table header, we're going to add a class of padding x2. And on the first one, we're going to also add a padding y of 4. Looking at the table row, we're going to add a odd background color, so every other should be a different color slightly. We're going to add a padding y of 4 again, and then every element's also going to get a padding x of 2. I also added some extra width on the song, just because those are typically longer. Next, we're going to create a function to handle our repeated songs. Inside of our dataset, we had a Boolean for repeated, but it doesn't appear that all that data is correct. So instead, I decided to do a for loop here, looking at all the tracks, and then we're going to create a if statement saying if the name of the track is repeated, we're going to add 1 to it, and if it's not already repeated, we are going to push it into the repeated titles and initialize it with a count of 1. Then we're going to update our track.repeated. So we're going to create a ternary. If the repeated title is greater than 1, it's going to print yes. And if not, it's going to say no. And you can see on March 24th, it says yes now. Next, we're going to go back to our app and we're going to create a useState function for our buttons. And we're going to have the initial state be on the played songs, because that's what most people come to this type of table to check. Next, we're going to create a handle select change function. That way, when we click on a button, we can update the information that's being returned. And then we're just going to pass that function inside of the song button. We can call it with the onClick. And don't forget, you need an empty parentheses with an arrow function before you can call that. And on each button, we're going to just pass in the same thing, except we're going to change the string on the second one to unplayed. And now is the perfect time to do a little styling here. So we're going to give a width of 20, a height of 10, border 2, give the border some color, and we're going to change some of the font attributes. We're also going to introduce a hover effect. So when we hover over each button, it will change color on the background and the text. And we're going to, of course, add a transition colors here as well. And I wasn't loving the size of the button, so I decided to go with a custom pixel count here. Next, we're going to update our song list table so we return the correct data set when the buttons are clicked. So for the first one, we're just going to copy over everything we have already entered. And then we're going to create a second return statement, and just to test that that's working, I just added test, and now when I click on played, it shows that H1. So now I'm just going to select everything inside of our first return statement, paste that in, and then we're going to remove all the unnecessary elements because we don't have a date, location, or repeat yet for any of the unplayed songs. And once we update the data set, you'll see the correct songs being listed below. It was right around this time where I finally realized my error and noticed that the end table tag was in the middle of my table. So I update that, and finally we can see that the formatting is correct. And I'll do the same on the table below. And now it's looking a lot better. Next, we're just going to update some of the styles so the spacing is correct on the unplayed songs. Making sure to give a padding X and padding Y. And do the same on the headers as well. And then I think it would look a little better if we had the newest tracks that were played come up first, since people tend to want to see the latest songs, not the oldest. And then we're just going to switch the variable that we're mapping over. And there you have it. Couple final touches. And the list is looking good. And here's what it looks like when you switch over to a smaller screen. And if it's small enough where all the data is not going to fit, you could of course scroll left and right. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more tips and tricks and tutorials, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.